morning. Welcome everyone. We are excited to have a special talk this morning. We have the DEA here. We have Wendell Campbell, and then we're going to have Gina Gischetti and Armando Talamantes. And we are going to talk about the dangers of fentanyl and other related prescription drugs. So if you have any questions about that, we're going to do a 10-15-minute presentation and then Q&A, okay? All right, any questions? No? Great. Oh, you said that's for later. Yeah, it's time for later. Thanks for following directions. That's perfect. All right.
All right, sure.
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. After years of cocaine, heroin, and marijuana use, Hollywood actor Robert Downey Jr. had this to say about his journey with drug abuse: that smoking dope and smoking coke renders you completely defenseless. The only way out of that hopeless state is through intervention. And the reality is, for many people in our culture, that intervention, that hopeless state, some people never receive it. They never are pulled up out of it. Several years ago, if you will recall, we saw pictures like similar to this in the media about Robert Downey Jr. having another encounter with law enforcement because of drug abuse, because of his role in Hollywood. He was very popular and so forth. But somebody cared enough about him to come alongside him and lift him up and consistently work with him to get him that intervention and that recovery that he needed. Now, how do we know Robert Downey Jr.? What do we know him by? We know him as Iron Man, right? Of course, right? This is Robert Downey Jr. today, right? Iron Man, one of the leaders of Avengers, right? One of the most popular Hollywood actors of our time, really. But he had a rocky road in getting there, but he went through a recovery process to get him to where he is today. In our nation right now, we're facing an epidemic, and we have really some serious drug threats out there. The most pervasive drug threat that we're facing as a nation is the abuse of opioids out there. Opioid prescription drugs for non-medical use as well as heroin. As a matter of fact, when you look at the high levels of abuse of heroin that really started coming on board back around 2007-8, we saw a big trend. Now, across Texas and the rest of the United States, we see the combination of prescription pills, heroin-based pills. We see heroin, and now a new synthetic opioid called fentanyl having devastating effects on our culture as a whole. So let's take a look at some numbers here. Since 2008, the CDC has highlighted that drug overdoses have been the leading cause of accidental death in our country. That is, as the abuse of opioid pills really started back in the 2006, 7, and 8 range, we started seeing more and more people die from drug overdoses related to opioid abuse. DEA saw that trend starting, and we came out in 2010 with our first prescription drug take-back, which the University of Texas takes part in. It's a nationwide effort that we have to really raise awareness also and provide an opportunity for people to turn in those unwanted and unused prescription drugs. So we saw the trend starting to escalate in 2008. It has built up to where we are 8 years later. So if we look at where we are 8 years later, CDC put out some recent data that showed in 2016, 63,600 people died from drug overdoses. 63,600 people in 2016. What's interesting about that data set is that's just what's reported to them. Think about the other numbers that didn't get tabulated possibly. Even though they do the best job they can, possibly there's some numbers out there where it's not tabulated into this number. What that equates to when you look at the data is approximately 174 people a day, or over 5,200 people a month in our country. Through 2016 were dying because of drug overdoses. That is a phenomenal number when you're looking at that. That should stop the presses, don't you agree? I mean, seriously, our country should come to a stop and say, wait a minute, we've got to fix this. Going into it a little bit deeper, though, if you really look at the numbers, you'll see that the majority of it, 66%, is related to opioid abuse. All spurred by the non-medical use of prescription drugs, as we saw that wave building in 2006, 7, 8, and 9 coming into the marketplace. So who's really dying each day? The reality is this: friends, family members, co-workers, right? We're seeing those people are the people that are dying each and every day in our culture. And it all started because of pill abuse. If you look at the trend, and this came out of actually a recent article published in 2017 out of Stanford University, was a republished article by them, but it talks about that we in America have approximately 5% of the world's population, but we are consuming approximately 99% of the world's hydrocodone. Think about that. That is phenomenal. Oxycodone, close to the same number, 78%. So we definitely have a pill abuse problem in our nation, and it all started just simply because of some tabs people were getting from doctors. As a matter of fact, we saw in 2006, 7, 8, 9, and 10 what we were referring to, right, Gina, as pill mills starting around different places. And we saw people doctor shopping. As a matter of fact, I've talked to people here in Austin, Texas, who make trips to Houston, spend 2 weeks at a time in Houston doctor shopping at every doctor they possibly can, and get as many prescriptions as they can, and they bring it back to the Austin area for sale and or use themselves. So it all started with basically those pills hitting the streets. They were being sold and used on a regular basis, and oftentimes we are viewed as kind of a pill nation right now. Black market sales have definitely increased. It's become a big business. Traffickers are definitely taking advantage of that. In the Austin area right now, what we're seeing is hydrocodone is selling anywhere from $7 to $20 per pill on the streets. Some other pills are selling for somewhere around $1 a milligram. So some pills, depending on if it's a strong oxycodone or tab like that, you're saying $1 a milligram could be $30 a pill, if not more, on the streets out there, is what we're typically seeing here in the Austin area. So when you look at the information related to opioid abuse, and you look at those using cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, PCP, ecstasy combined, what we're really seeing is the abuse of pills is higher than all those combined. So it tells you that there's a lot of pills on the street. It's a very popular thing to use those pills. And here's the question I have for you. Why is it that the pills are perceived the way they are? Why are we seeing such higher levels of abuse of pills? What's the perception in people's mind about the pill? Less stigma. It's more acceptable.
It's safer.
It's safer. That's exactly right. That's the perception, even though we know the product that exists in those pills is just as dangerous as what people are buying off the street. And the data is already there. We've seen the results of pill abuse in America. So, as a result of the increasing cost of pills on the streets, we've seen a trend toward people now looking for heroin to meet that opioid need. It's cheaper, it's very available, gives them the same effect as they had coming from the opioid-based pills themselves. And so now we are seeing heroin starting to escalate over the last several years and flood into the country by the cartels, bringing more heroin into the country and taking advantage of the opioid problem and the demand that we're seeing. What's interesting is CDC says that more younger Americans are starting to use opioids now than ever before. This is an investigation here on the screen that we did that actually involved commercial-sized cans of food that would normally be manufactured in a warehouse. Instead, the cartels were manufacturing compressed heroin inside these cans, a half a pound of heroin at a time, shipping it into the United States. And then, of course, once it gets here, it gets broken down and distributed throughout our local communities. What we've also seen is, in the past, years ago when I first came on with DEA back in the early 90s, what we saw was that heroin was really kind of the urban drug. It was the big city drug. What we've seen, though, over the last multiple years with the escalation of the pill abuse, and the pill abuse went from the larger cities, it went from the medium-sized cities even to small rural areas. We've seen pill abuse footprint all over those areas. We've seen the same thing with heroin. Heroin is across the board in every community, large and small alike, and it's affecting everyone across the board. So what we really see is escalation of heroin coming to the United States, and we see it packaged in all kinds of different ways. We see it in PCV pipes, sealed on both ends, trying to keep dogs from detecting it coming across the southwest border. We see it packaged into barrels of different types of solvents to help hold or contain the scent of it while protecting it in some type of PCV barrel as well. Like this looks like a tubular shape, so it came in some type of tubular type container to keep it protected. You'll see a reagent system test kit that we use to test the presence of a heroin reagent in there, so it shows positive for that. Here's a seizure along the southwest border of 50 pounds of heroin out of a vehicle. And then the cartels, they do not allow an opportunity to go by. What we are seeing in the last few years as a trend is this. From South America and Mexico, the cartels are manufacturing counterfeit pills, and this particular lot happened to be laced with heroin, being shipped across the southwest border. So now it makes it into the United States, and it's being sold as a legitimate type prescription drug, hydrocodone or something else on the streets to that consumer. Because of the opioid escalation, we have seen the trafficking cells step their game up and take advantage of that by the introduction of fentanyl, which is a synthetic opioid. It can be 30 to 50 times, if not more, potent. As a matter of fact, it can be thousands of times more potent depending on the type of fentanyl that it is. And we're seeing that appear across the board mixed with heroin. We're seeing it mixed with counterfeit pills on a regular basis coming into the United States. And we've seen that escalate quite heavily. As a matter of fact, going back, and this is a significant date, 2013 right here. If you look at 2013, a recent chart that I received from DEA headquarters, we have a system in place where our headquarters communicates with drug labs all around the nation to look at different drug trends or if there are any new drugs coming into communities and so forth. With that system, they are tracking different seizures of drugs and the number of that type of drug coming in. For example, going back to 2012, there were approximately 694 reported seizures or testings of fentanyl in drug labs nationwide. Go to 2013, it bumps up to just over 1,000. Go to 2014, it goes to over 5,500. And then you go to 2015, it goes up to 15,000. So in a short window, we saw a lot of expansion on labs testing certain substance, whether a pill or heroin or fentanyl by itself, being tested in drug labs around the nation. Then you fast forward to 2016, it goes to 36,887, and in 2017 over 38,000. So there's been a lot of incidents out there where now fentanyl's popping up in drug labs around the country. And really what we're seeing is fentanyl being shipped into the United States in kilo-sized quantities. This is stamped with a mark of 3 on it. Cartels track their drugs by putting certain stamps on them. Sometimes they're stamped with a president's name on it. Sometimes they're stamped with numbers on it or different symbols. It's just the way they keep track of their drugs as it's shipped into the United States. So this is a 1 kilo amount of fentanyl. It runs about $5,000 to $7,000 online if you ordered it online. And you could actually go online and do that. And that's one of the ways it's coming into the United States. It's being shipped directly from rogue labs in Southeast Asia to the United States, directly to people's doorstep. We also see it coming into Mexico, shipped in by the cartels, and the cartels have taken advantage of this big time by shipping in hundreds of kilos of fentanyl at a time into the United States over the last several years. In addition to that, we see fentanyl coming from Southeast Asia to Canada and coming into the United States, and several of our investigations in this area has revealed a Canadian connection as well with fentanyl coming into our area here. So we're definitely dealing with a consistent inflow of this new drug threat called fentanyl, and really we've seen fentanyl hit the United States and hitting that marketplace. That 2013, 2014 time frame is when things started to escalate. So the last 3 or 4 years we've really seen that pick up. But in conjunction with that, we've seen also the overdose death rate increase with the introduction of fentanyl into our marketplace. So So let's take a look at how we deal with fentanyl. When we encounter fentanyl out on the streets, we consider it a clandestine laboratory situation, much like a methamphetamine lab. When we hit a methamphetamine lab, we have to wear certain protective suits as agents to go in and do the cleanup. Fentanyl is no exception. We have to wear the suits that you see on the screen here, where agents are completely enclosed, they have their own oxygen source and so forth. We'll go into a particular fentanyl lab and do the cleanup and make sure that the area is safe. But for the agents, when they come out, they have to be decontaminated, which means they gotta go through a two-step wash process. All that water is maintained, it's put in barrels, it's taken to a waste site and disposed of appropriately. But it's very challenging to deal with these sites. It's very expensive for us to deal with them as well. And Armando, correct me if I'm wrong, but somewhere between $5,000 to $10,000 per site for the taxpayer cleanup. That's what it costs from an expense standpoint. So very dangerous product for first responders as well, not to mention those using it and even those manufacturing it. So fentanyl powder. We see people ingest it, we see people take it with pills and so forth. 2 milligrams, as is noted on the screen, is enough to be what's considered a lethal dose. As a matter of fact, let me give you a picture of 2 milligrams. There's a penny kind of magnified with a little dosage unit beside it. That's 2 milligrams, that's a lethal dose. And we have several sweetener packs here. Now, when y'all go to your local restaurant, do y'all see packs like this sitting on the table? Absolutely, right? And this is 1 gram or 1,000 milligrams. So 2 milligrams of the 1,000 in this pack is enough to be a lethal dose for someone with fentanyl. So it tells you how potent the product is and how toxic it is and how dangerous that product is. So that's why we treat it the way we do when we go into different sites. So what we've seen is with the abuse of fentanyl and the onset of what we refer to as really the manufacturing of pills and so forth, and that's been the most common way that we're seeing fentanyl hit the streets now, is through rogue counterfeit pills being made, as well as it being mixed with heroin out there. We've just seen a huge escalation. Now, a new trend we've seen since 2016 is we're making seizures of kilos coming across the southwest border, and we have kilos of cocaine and methamphetamine being mixed with fentanyl already, as well as heroin. So the trafficking organizations are spiking their product, and it's like the old speedball stuff from the 1970s, where people were mixing an amphetamine with some type of opioid type product. So what we're seeing now, and this has really probably been in the last few years, we've really seen an escalation of pill manufacturing sites. And this has been a regular trend for us that we've seen. A lot of our investigations will detect these different rogue manufacturing sites where they're manufacturing their own pills, and they are lacing the pills with fentanyl. And so when the pill mill gets set up, or the pill processing place gets set up, I should say, and they start manufacturing these pills, the person who's manufacturing is usually making it in their garage or the shed in their backyard or some empty warehouse. And they're mixing fentanyl with just a base product. And what the manufacturer hopes to try to achieve is to get 1 milligram or half a milligram or 1.5 milligrams of fentanyl per tablet that's spit out of that machine. And there's can be thousands made at a time. However, what we have seen is usually they don't get the mix right. And we're seeing 2 milligrams, 4 milligrams, 3 milligrams, 8 milligrams of fentanyl per tab, and that's where we see the overdoses. Now, what the traffickers are doing now is they're setting up these rogue pill manufacturing sites, making these pills by the thousands. And Armando, we've seized, 400,000 or 500,000 tabs at a time that are clandestinely made counterfeit pills, and they are being distributed throughout Houston, Austin, San Antonio regions, and even shipped to other areas of the country depending on the size of their operation. They're using machines like this to press out those pills, Here's the thing, those pills have the same color, stamp marking. It looks exactly like you would see coming out of a pharmaceutical bottle. So when they go with a bag of them and sell those pills, and people look at them, they can't tell the difference, and they're selling them as hydrocodone typically, which is one of the most popular tabs on the street. They just don't know it's been laced with fentanyl. And typically the traffickers will try to use 1 milligram on average because a kilo of fentanyl has 1 million milligrams in it. 1 kilo. And if they're using 1 milligram, how many tabs could they potentially make? Almost 1 million tabs. And you take 1 million tabs and you sell those tabs for $10 each on the street, what's that profit margin? Phenomenal. And so what we're seeing is the trafficking organizations are moving toward that because of the profit margin involved. And at the end of the day, you know, it's all about the money. Now, lately in the news, what we've seen too is more articles such as this coming out in the media, that more pill presses are being seized than ever, because we just see a lot of counterfeit pills being made, trying to meet the need and even take advantage of the opioid abuse in our culture right now. In many areas, especially in the Northeast, fentanyl's completely replaced heroin. They don't even use heroin, they're just using fentanyl straight up because of the potency of it and how little it takes, you know, to make that profit along the way. And when it all comes down to it, really, what are the trafficking cells after?
Money.
It's all about the money, right? That's it. It's all about the money. And listen, the drug dealer doesn't care about your family, your friends. They don't care about how it impacts our local communities or our culture. They just care about making some money. That's what it's all about. Here's a seizure that we did a while back. When we actually hit this house, this particular safe was so full of U.S. currency that the safe could not be closed. That's how much money was in that particular safe. This seizure was made along the southwest border, a little over $1 million U.S. currency, and then here's about 2 million U.S. currency. But at the end of the day, it's really about making money at the expense of other people's lives and a total disregard for our culture and our communities as a whole. So this is a recent event that y'all participated in actually just a couple of days ago, right, Dr. Laura? Yeah, so got students from UT out there with DEA, with the drug prescription take back. It's a great program in that we once again raise awareness out there for the community, but also can work with numerous local agencies and other people to get involved, to continue that education process, and really hopefully have an impact and steer where we've been heading on this opioid epidemic a different direction. So with that said, I guess myself and Supervisor Gina Gichetti will go ahead and take some questions if y'all have any questions.
Fantastic.